what keeps you up at night for, thinking what people don't hear from you?
Yeah, I think as transaction-based as the insurance business has become, and it's largely because of all the advertising influences that people are bombarded with, I think paying attention to adequate liability limits is the most important. It is the single biggest potential loss everybody faces, and here's the thing about it. You bring up the deer claim situation, right? Well, that's a frequent occurrence. If you don't have that accident, you know of someone that has, right? It happens frequently. But the loss tends to be very minimal compared to something that happens infrequently, like a liability loss. But the severity can be significant. So one of the things I think that we really try to stress and encourage people to do is to practice good insurance setup, program setup. And basically what that boils down to is making sure that I'm taking some of the low-end risk myself and trading those dollars with the insurance company.
So like deductibles?
Yeah,
kind of type
proper
thing?
use of deductibles. Maybe in some cases I'm not putting physical damage or property damage coverage in place on certain things. And I'm using the money that I save on those smaller, less severe losses and applying it to those less frequent but significantly more severe losses on the liability side.
So shifting the policy cost, basically saying, look, if you can't afford X, then let's set aside some of the lower key and frequent issues, so reduce those and increase your liability limits so that you're really protecting those bigger assets, or doing what you said, the deductibility management.
Right. You're basically saying, I'm going to take some of the low-end risk myself. I'm going to self-insure for the small stuff. That stuff I can't afford, that stuff that could bankrupt me, that could ruin me financially, I'm going to transfer that. That's what I'm going to pay for.
And what would you say is the #1 mistake that people have? Is it the liability side or make and they're selecting their insurance?
I think it's just what we talked about. Is people, they see the frequent types of claims, they're familiar with that, they don't want to pay a $500 or a $1,000 deductible. They don't see the large liability losses because that doesn't happen every day, right? And they maybe don't pay as much attention to that as they should.
If you could give 1 or 2 tips for people that are dealing with online insurers. In my career, I've had a couple instances where I've worked with some folks that have gone, we won't mention names, but we'll just say to, solely online. And it's really a cost issue. They're trying, they think they're saving money. If you could give 2 tips to those people about, what to look out for or what to ask questions for when they're thinking about going that direction, what would they be?
It would be along the same lines that they tend to skimp on those less familiar coverages that are the ones that could bankrupt you. And the savings is many times trimming those around corners that, the $20 that they might have saved you could have been better spent by shifting things differently than what they're doing. It's an easy thing to do because it's not as noticeable, not as understood, let's say.
Are there advocates that can help people with these kinds of things? I mean, I would say the agents are advocates, but are there, when people are analyzing this sort of thing, if they're trying to do it on their own, what would you say they should do? Where should they look?
Well, I would say an agent, a good quality independent agent, for example, is a good place to start. And if they're a local agent, they're the ones that have to look you in the eye if something is going to happen, whereas that person you're calling on the phone won't have to bear that uncomfortable circumstance. So that's one area. The state of New York has some excellent material actually online through the Department of Financial Services related to what to look for in your insurance program as well.
So that's some places that they maybe could get some education before they sit down with somebody. And I know from my experience, this is something that I've shared with people a lot of times. Ask who's going to help you process the claims, right? So in our situation, I've been very fortunate over the years that anytime there's been that deer, we've called our local agent, and they have walked us through every step of the way. They've always been right there for us and said, okay, we'll arrange the underwriter, we'll get, you know, that scheduled for you, or get them in contact with you. So, and we have that communication. I know years ago, a tree fell on our old house, and the agent was up there taking pictures very quickly because we wanted to get it off our house, number one. You know, so it was really a collaboration of you know, somebody kind of walking us through, like, what? Okay, literally a tree just fell on our house.
Right.
What do we do? You know, we both just kind of looked at each other like, did that really just happen? And they walked us through every step of the way. If I understand correctly, if you go with an online service, you call an 800 number.
Right.
And then what? I mean, do you have to take your own pictures? Do you have to, what do? Do you have to wait till somebody shows up to get that tree off your house?
Usually an online carrier would have, you know, a process that they would put in front of the client and say, hey, look, this is what you do next, and we'll send an adjuster out when we can get one out there.
So that's a really important question to ask.
Sure.
Before you purchase insurance, if something happens to me, is somebody from your office going to show up? Or if they're doing that online, if something happens to me, what's your process?
And it's different for every claim. We don't run out on every claim, but it's interesting you mentioned that the last claim that I was out on was a tree that fell on a customer's house. It wasn't you, no. I think that is an advantage of a local agent. You've got representation that can help you walk through that process, which, let's face it, the average person has a claim once every maybe 14 years, and you know, by the time it rolls around again, you forget, well, what am I supposed to do? And that all might change in the meantime too. So, yeah, we try to be an advocate, an ambassador for them to walk through the process.
Is there any other tips or suggestions or ideas that you have for people when they're thinking about this important topic?
What comes to mind when we're talking about this and how you can maximize the dollars on your insurance is really the proper use of deductibles. And one of the things that I think people aren't aware of is that when you trade dollars with an insurance company with low deductibles, it's very expensive. When you talk about pennies on the dollar for large liability coverage, it's dimes, quarters on the dollar for lower deductibles. And so we try to encourage folks to take a look at, what's my break even on my deductible? When do I break even on increasing my deductible, let's say from 500 to 1,000? And most people would see on newer vehicles a break even somewhere in the 3 to 4 to 5 year range.
Okay.
Now, that might be a little bit financially complicated for some, but what it means is every 3 or 4 or 5 years, I get my deductible back in savings, in insurance cost savings, right? So, if that's all you did to take a look at, okay, am I adequately insured on my liability piece, you would probably find a return much greater for the dollars that you're going to spend to cover myself for those large losses. And I think that's one thing that is worth people's effort, just to see, you know, where is a good point where I break even early on my deductible.
So you can be protected on the backside of things.
Exactly.
And like I said, my biggest concern as a financial advisor, when I'm sitting down with somebody, it's always one of those things that people are saying, you know, I feel like because the premium is usually a once a year or twice a year premium, so they're only seeing that big dollar figure that they're paying. And they're like, oh, I really wish I could save money. And I'm always of the mindset that, well, I want you to save money too, but I want to make sure that if there's a major incident that you're not losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that people look at those declaration pages that they get in the mail, and they're great. I mean, you know, but taking the time to call and say, you know what, I know it's only been 2 years, but can you walk through this with me again?
Yeah.
You know, so that you're educated. And because the laws do change and things do change, it's probably good, would you say, every 3 years to have a conversation?
I think so, yeah. There isn't a lot that changes within a 3 year period, I would think. And if there was, if your agent is on the ball, they're going to notify you of any major change. But yeah, every 3 years it would be good to just take a look and ask questions.
Do I have the right coverage? Yeah. And one of the things that people are so funny about is they don't like to tell anybody their financial situation. So when I look at it, knowing what assets they have and what their income looks like, and I say, I really think you're underinsured.
Yeah.
And then, they're like, well, I don't know, I talk to my agent, he thinks I'm good or she thinks I'm good. Don't you think it's helpful for you to have some of that information as well?
That's a really good point. Hey, we don't ask that question because if we ask that question, it's almost like, well, how much money do you have to give to the insurance company? Right? And that's really, that's what we're trying to protect, right?
Yeah.
So if we have some idea that, you've got assets to protect it, that's important for us to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're judgment proof and you don't have any assets, it's a little different scenario, right?
Right. But if you're looking at, if you've been a good saver and you've got property and you've got, really good, people don't think about pensions. I know a lot of people don't have those anymore like we used to have them. But, now their 401k plans are enormous. And what do you do when you have a 401k plan and you leave work? You roll it over to an IRA, right? So you're losing some protection when you do that kind of thing. And so, I don't think people think, the one thing from my angle is I don't think people actually think of their insurance agent as a financial partner.
Right.
And I think that if your assets and your income, are significant, and I would say, even over that $300,000 mark, depending where your income is, then that's significant, and that's everything for you especially, then I think your liability limits should be, at that level. But I think, thinking of an agent as your partner, as your financial partner, as much as you would think of a CFP as your financial partner, I think that, starting to mold that in just a little bit as a piece of the puzzle is really important.
It's really a financial tool. It allows people to do things they otherwise couldn't if insurance wasn't a piece of it. And I think a point that you're making here also is that it makes sense to have a professional that you're doing your whole account with.
Yeah.
If you've got your auto with XYZ company and you've got your home here and you've got your rental properties here and maybe your farm is over there, if no one professional knows what you have at risk and can coordinate those coverages appropriately, you're probably not getting the best deal price-wise.
Is there anything else that you wish that you could share with people about this particular topic?
Well, I appreciate the work that you do, Amy, because it is part of a financial plan. It is part of your overall financial program. So thank you for the efforts that you put forth on that.
Well, we appreciate your time today, and certainly we'll put your information out there if people want to call you and chat with you. I know you have offices in both Jasper and Hornell, and willing to chat with anybody even if they're not in those two locations.
Sure.
And we just appreciate the thoughts that you've shared and the importance of this topic. I don't think people just really need to hone in on it a little bit, so thank you.